Okay, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Unibuddy virtual conference today. Hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. So many great sessions going on. And yeah, thank you very much for joining our session today on the secrets to smooth sailing virtual events. And I have to say that's not as easy to say as it looks, to be honest. So I'm pleased I got that right. I'm Ian, one of your hosts for today, and I'll be hosting alongside my colleague Yolanda King. And I'm very pleased to say that we've got some special guests as well from Lancaster University who will be telling us all their secrets over the next 45 minutes or so. We'll do some proper intros in a second. Just to give you a little bit more context about the session. So it's a very interactive session. So it's a Q&A. So please, you as the audience, feel free to post in questions at any point, and we'll pick those up periodically and grill Lancaster with those. And very much, I think live events is still a very relevant topic. I think most of us would have hoped that virtual events wouldn't have to be such a thing with COVID having disappeared somewhat, but unfortunately it looks like it's going to be here for quite some time, and virtual events are very much going to be a strong thing going into 2021. And I'm pleased to say that Lancaster are going to be telling us a little bit about how they've pivoted very quickly over the past few months into running virtual events very successfully. And we're specifically going to be looking at how they've gone about planning those virtual events. And I imagine there wasn't a lot of planning time. So we look forward to hearing about how they went about that. We'll also be looking at how they went about getting buy-in across the university. So getting particularly academics on board and their student ambassadors on board for these virtual events. And then thirdly, the third theme is looking at how they've gone about managing those events when they're actually on the day live. I think, as we'll probably find out later, managing a virtual event on the day is very different to managing an in-person event. So we're keen to find out a little bit more about how they've managed that process. So before we jump into the questions, let's do some proper intros then. So I'm Ian, one of the customer success managers at Unibuddy. So I support a lot of our university partners, mainly in the UK and the Middle East, and Lancaster are one of those that I work with very closely. Yolanda, happy to do a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Yolanda, and I'm a University Partnership Executive at Unibuddy. So you'll probably, if you do speak to me, it'll be at the very kind of beginnings of your connection with Unibuddy, because I do a lot of outreach across the European region. So that will be when you kind of come across me.
Great. And then the team at Lancaster, happy to do a quick intro about your roles?
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to kick off?
Yeah,
cool. I'm Lindsay. I manage the Student Ambassador Programme at Lancaster. I'm also currently managing the events team. We've been involved in Unibuddy since the beginning, really, for around 3 years now. So we were very much involved in kind of the pilot, and we've been trialling things like the live events along the way. So we've had quite a lot of involvement with all the team at Unibuddy. So hopefully we'll be able to answer some questions today on that transition over to remote events.
Thanks very much, Lindsay.
Me to go next?
Yeah, brilliant.
So I'm Sophie. I've been now working at Lancaster as an event assistant for just over a year. I've recently just started getting more involved on the Unibuddy platform side of things. The first big bit I did was the admin side for our online open days in June. And then I've been keeping an eye on basically student chats and everything like that going forward.
Me last. So I'm Jen, and I'm a student recruitment officer here at Lancaster. I'm based in Lancaster's South office, so I am actually based in the London team. I've been working kind of on Unibuddy alongside Lindsay and Sophie from the recruitment event side of things. I am also a staff buddy, so I speak to prospective students quite a lot through that profile. And at my previous role at a previous institution, I kind of did a similar role to Lindsay and Sophie with managing the Unibuddy platform. So I had quite a lot of experience with you guys.
Brilliant. And thanks again all for joining today. We're really pleased to have you and to pick your brains. So Lindsay, I'm quite keen to pick your brains first, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
I know you've done a lot of planning around these virtual events at Lancaster. So at the beginning of the year, was it in your mindset when COVID wasn't a thing? Were you planning to run some virtual events, or was it very literally you've had to pivot very quickly into getting it together?
I'd say a little bit of both. I think quite lucky, really, in the sense that at the start of the year, we'd already had in mind of incorporating the live event platform with Unibuddy a little bit more in our general activity. So we had planned our applicant visit day season, which runs from January to March/April. We decided to run a couple of online events in March and April anyway, prior to the whole coronavirus and lockdown and the rest of it. So that was quite a good starting point, because it gave that little bit of knowledge that we'd gained from doing that anyway. And we did actually see the March one was relatively quiet. We probably only had around 20-ish people there, but by the April one, when people were working remotely a lot more, we did see a step up to over 100 people at that. So we quite rapidly learned the platform. And then not long after that, we realised this was going to be a more longer term solution. And that's when we started working from home and we started incorporating remote events a lot more in what we had planned for recruitment activity throughout the year. And so, yeah, that's kind of where it started. And then from there, the next kind of big thing that we did was, I think we were the first team to use the live stream function on live events at our Teachers and Advisors Conference with the recruitment team, which was very much in the final stages of being released essentially at Unibuddy. So it was a bit of a risk in kind of getting everything going. But again, that was a starting point for engaging the wider recruitment team and some of our departments in the platform, which led us to this summer and the open days, which are our biggest event. And that's where we really have kind of had the Unibuddy platform as part of it, alongside some Teams events and other kind of activity as well. But the Unibuddy has kind of replicated our departmental chat. And every subject's able to have a channel to answer questions. And that's really the big event where we've essentially launched it throughout the university, got academics, departments, facilities, kind of everyone really involved and able to, accessible to the student body essentially.
So what was the kind of timeline between thing actually, we're going to do some virtual events too. Oh no, we've got to do everything now virtual. What was the kind of the planning horizon, if you like, for that?
So we have to submit papers to our management committee to get approval, obviously, to move things online in the first instance. We didn't actually get approval until the very end of April to run the June and July open days online, which left us with about 2 months really to plan them. So a very kind of small space of time to be able to then go from what was a big event, and we'd still obviously had to do some planning for that in case they did say yes, go ahead, to then having the kind of wider scale events. So that was interesting, and it meant that we weren't able to kind of build or create a bespoke platform. We had to really kind of look at what we already had. One of the platforms of which was Unibuddy, to be able to then launch something, and also just utilise who we had in house, so our kind of IT support teams and our marketing team, to really put together some form of event. And it was very much okay, let's piece this together now.
Resources. Yeah.
And so we did manage to do that for the June and July to the best of our ability, knowing that we couldn't do everything and there was kind of demand for more live and interactive activity. We didn't get the decision for the September and October open days until middle of August. So again, it was quite last minute. We had about a month between then and September to then not just replicate what we've done in June and July, but add to that and develop it. And that even included the initial event. We ran 2 Unibuddy live events, one for student life, accommodation, etc., and one for Meet Your Department. Because there's only 25 channels we could have as the limit, there was some feedback that certain departments and subjects wanted their own channels. So that allowed us to then say, well, okay, we'll do 2 separate Meet Your Department events to allow for more channels. So along the way, we did kind of make some tweaks to make it as good an experience as possible from a visitor and a user perspective, really, from our side too.
Perfect. And you kind of mentioned there, you've got to be very resourceful. I think when it's kind of thrown at you, you've got to think, what can we already use internally? Was it just Unibuddy that you used for your events, or were there other things that you tried out as well? I think sometimes there's a bit of a trial and error and seeing what works and doesn't work initially when you've got not much time to plan. So what was the kind of technique there?
We used a variety of platforms. So we had a team based on site who filmed some footage, almost like a live stream. So kind of almost a TV show setup, nice. Which tried to get as engaged as possible with the kind of student body. And that was streamed through the website. It was streamed through some social media pages and YouTube. We used Instagram to kind of obviously drum up some interest through the Instagram story and the kind of platform there, which did get a lot of views and did drum up quite a bit of interest through the social media side of things. We used Microsoft Teams a lot more in September and October than in the summer ones, but we used them for some more departmental sessions, so some calls within departments and a way to kind of have that face-to-face chat a little bit, which is something that the academics and students alike had requested as well. So we incorporated some of that Teams element in it as well. So I think they were the kind of, essentially the core of it was the live stream, the kind of live events, and then the Unibuddy running alongside it throughout the whole event as a place for people to come and ask specific questions at any point. It's also worth adding, we extended the day. So the initial one was at 10 till 2, which we did extend until 2:30 for the Unibuddy side, so we're still getting questions. And then we extended the day out till 10 till 4 for the September and October ones, just to allow for more content and things throughout the day as well.
Perfect. And you must have done a lot. I think over the past few months, people just had to go with it without too much planning. So if I was to kind of put you on the spot and say, what's been your biggest challenge? Or maybe what wouldn't you do again is another way of looking at it. And what tip would you give to someone out there saying, actually, this went really well. We didn't necessarily expect that to work so well, but we would definitely do that again. What advice would you give on that front?
It's been a big learning curve, to be honest. And I think alongside us running some of the events, there's been some new implemented changes of Unibuddy Live. So an example being so initially everyone had to be active to be able to add it to the live event, and now they can be deactivated, which makes life a lot easier. I suppose the big thing that I'd say my top tip is just communication and having the bodies there to be able to coordinate it. So this is specifically to the Unibuddy Live side of it, but alongside that, we ran a channel that almost replicated the Unibuddy Live event in Microsoft Teams, where people could put comments to each other. Every single channel had a coordinator to allocate questions. You don't have multiple people jumping on to answer at the same time. So I think for me, just be prepared and just kind of make sure you've got time to do the training. So you're training up. We had across all 3 Unibuddy events, we had around probably 50 or 60 channels. So that meant 50 or 60 coordinators to actually do it. On those channels themselves, we had probably about 300 people as well. So taking the time to sit down, kind of train up the coordinators, train up the wider people that are using the platform, it just kind of helped it really run smoothly. And I think just having that coordinator and having that knowledge across the board is what made it kind of run as smoothly as it did do. So really that'd be my kind of top tip, is just preparation, communication is key.
Don't be afraid of it not going perfectly first time. I think that's always the thing as well. Maybe run a small event first is always my, and let the things happen that are going to go wrong in a small event. If someone hasn't run an event before, whether it's via Unibuddy or any other platform, how long have you kind of spent preparing for each event? Because I get a question a lot of, how far in advance should we create the event or start planning the event? And what do you do at Lancaster? How far in advance?
Relatively close to it, actually, and it's what we've kind of fallen into a bit of a routine, and really it's a couple of weeks leading up to it. Before then, probably about 3 or 4 weeks before, we'll send a survey out which collects the information about if we've got a coordinator, or we also offer the opportunity for one of our team to be the coordinator if they can't provide one or they're not comfortable themselves. We find out who's going to be on the channel. Within our team, we then have a look about kind of who's already on there, who we need to invite to get an account. So we get all the back office side set up. Once that's done, I go ahead and I create both the actual events, but I also create a mock event that runs for a week, which allows people to jump on. It's exactly the same as what the open day looks like, and to have a play around, which I think really helps in people feeling comfortable. And then that mock event runs, essentially the open days on a Saturday, and that runs the Monday, the Friday leading up to it. And the training's usually the week before that. So I'll put in the slot potentially the end of that week, Thursday, Friday, both for the coordinators and for the wider body, for anybody new to the platform, just explaining it, giving people a chance to ask questions. I'll share my screen and run through it. And we'll screen record that as well, because obviously when you've got hundreds of people, some people might not be able to make the actual session. And then really, we ask the coordinators then, we send them an email out, and they'll contact the people within their channel and arrange a time that week leading up to it to have a play around on the mock event. And I think, again, just kind of that allows people to really feel like, okay, they've seen the platform, they've played with it, they know what to do, they know how to reply, and I think they go into it comfortable, which kind of really helps, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is sometimes a little bit of hesitation, like, I haven't used this kind of thing before. It's a new technology, but yeah, giving them a chance to actually go in and say, actually, this is quite easy. This is, I don't need to be stressed about this on the day. That would definitely be one of my advice as well, from that point of view. And how does that differ from your planning from physical events? Do you start planning those a lot earlier than virtual events, or is it kind of the same process? Do you have more people working on virtual events or physical events? How does that sort of resource-wise differ?
I think in some ways, similarly, a lot of the kind of work that's done in the lead up to it by the core team is still done ahead of time. Yeah. But actually the involvement of some of because there's so many people involved in an open day, whether it's remote or physical, some of the actual briefings and some of that kind of finalised information, probably again for the physical events, for the wider team, would come in probably a couple of weeks before, whereas there'd be the people planning it for months before. So I think there is still an element of that, because the core team were still spending a lot more time beforehand getting all the planning in place for what we were doing. But when it comes to pushing out, obviously there's constant communication in that time about what the plans are and what we're going to do. But I think for things like training and briefings, to keep it fresh in people's minds, it's kind of good to do it as close as possible to the actual event, whether that's physical or remote, really.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm a very last minute person myself. I'm like, oh, if it's weeks away, I'll be like, yeah, I don't need to know that yet. So I think, yeah, it very much depends on the people that you're working with, I think. But that's a great point. I think I'm going to ask you about 2021 very shortly, but I think we've had some questions come in, and I want to kind of tackle some of those first. So Yolanda, we had some questions come in, or am I seeing things in my old age?
No, we have had some questions, as well as some praise about the practice events that I thought I would mention. So I'm liking that. But yeah, the first question, do you think that you'll continue to do virtual events post-COVID?
Absolutely, yes. I think this really has changed the thinking, and I'm sure kind of institutions across the globe really will agree with this. It's opened eyes up to, number one, different ways of doing things. I think a lot of these things were in people's mind before COVID, but perhaps a lack of knowledge and that resistance to change meant people weren't implementing it, whereas this has kind of forced everyone's hand a little bit. So I think now we're all a lot more competent, really, in these remote events. I think there's the definite kind of option to have it there, but also even things, open days primarily for us are usually a UK-based recruitment and conversion activity, but we did have people tuning in from around 40 different countries, so it kind of opens your eyes that actually that international student base we can really kind of connect with these activities that we wouldn't normally do. So I certainly think even post-COVID there needs to be kind of a bit of a mixture of the two. So I think there's certainly a place still for physical events, I'd say, but I think definitely that remote element, it really does open the doors for a whole array of different activity you can do with prospective students.
Thanks for that. And another question is kind of got a couple of parts. Have you found that different groups of students respond differently to different types of events? So have you noticed perhaps some students like certain platforms or certain formats that you've used?
That'd be interesting actually to do a little bit more research on, I think, because I think we get the stats following the events and we can see things like different countries and we can get those kind of breakdowns of who's attended. With regard to actually, is there a preference for those? I think that'd probably take a little bit more research and asking that question. And it is something I am keen to do, to actually ask that question of, would this suit you? Some feedback we did have from our first two open days, from our international team, the live stream element, which was very much, like I said, kind of a TV show basis, there were some thoughts that might not have appealed to certain kind of international audiences because of that view that university, it's a big decision and it's quite a professional thing. And the fact that that kind of live TV thing brought a bit more fun into it. In some countries, perhaps that wouldn't have gone down as well because people might have felt we weren't taking it seriously in what we actually have to offer. So I thought that was a really valid point, that you do kind of have to take into account that offer you're putting out there, that you think, okay, this probably will go down with a lot of people, but then knowing that we're getting a lot more of that international audience, I think it really does kind of take some thinking about actually what do these guys want, and kind of let's go and find out and basically make sure the activities that we're offering aligns with that, essentially.
Thanks.
No worries.
Questions, Yolanda?
No, sorry, that's it for the questions, I think. Oh no, we've got some more. Do you use live streams for open day events? A question. So I mean, yeah.
We haven't done actually on these ones that have just gone. So the only time we've used a live stream so far is in the Teachers and Advisors Conference, which was very much kind of the presenting thing. And the reason we've not opted for that, there's a couple of reasons really. One is because there's so many different subjects on the channels that we couldn't fairly allocate a slot to everybody. Another is the fact that there was that kind of requirement in some cases for that two-way conversation and for that face-to-face chat. So obviously with the live stream, you can speak from the presenter side, but there's the text coming back at you, if that makes sense. So there was kind of that face-to-face element, which is why we opted for Teams for that. But it did work really well, a live stream for our Teachers and Advisors Conference, which had kind of, as you'd expect, teachers and advisors from around mainly the UK, but again, some different sessions. We had UCAS presenting there as well. And I think that that kind of showcase that platform has kind of a lot of use in that sense as well. So, but yeah, for the open days themselves, no, we just use the chat function.
Okay, yeah, that's a great answer. Sorry, I miss you got the question better than I did. Here's another one. How do you advertise the online events?
The online events are advertised obviously primarily through the website. We have an inbuilt CRM system, so where we're able to kind of target people that have expressed interest before, we can obviously send those out, the events where they've kind of said they want that communication from us. We have different kind of newsletters and things that go out to schools that are sent from our recruitment team as well, so they're pushed out through those formats. And I think there's some general paid advertising as well, so when people look on Google, we'll kind of see the open day pop up too. So there's a few different methods that we use to push the word out there, really, that we've got these events happening.
Sorry, there's more coming in. You're getting grilled. How do you advertise? Oh no, that's the same question. What are the top 3 takeaways from your recent experiences for a smooth virtual event?
Top 3 takeaways. I think I don't want to kind of repeat what I've said before, but I do think that it is really key to be prepared and have the right amount of staff working it to make sure that you can manage everything on that coordinator level, because if you've got 25 channels, you can't just have one person coordinating that. It needs to really kind of flow. Making sure you've got that training in place, and so making sure that everyone that is on the platform kind of does have a full understanding. The other one, I'd say, preparing in advance your opening and closing messages, and I also prepare one for about 20 minutes before the end, making sure before the event and just reminding them as well when they need to post it for all the coordinators, just welcoming people so they can pin that message there, and also just letting people know when there's 20 minutes left, and then at the end where they can speak for further information, so they can direct to a website or an email, and potentially if you've got the general Unibuddy chat built into the website for the Ask a Student, just directing them to that as well if once the event closes they want to carry on conversation with a student. So I'd say that's really important as well.
Cool, thank you. I think we'll pause with the audience questions for now, but I promise we will come back to those, but just meant to make sure we get a full well-rounded session and move on to theme 2. So thanks, Lindsay, for that. I think that got a lot of people thinking. And Lindsay, I don't know whether you're going to be around for the speakers lounge afterwards, but Lindsay will be in there to answer any questions after the session as well. So I'll hand over to you, Yolanda, for the next theme.
Thanks, Ian. So these questions I think are going to be answered by Sophie, and they're based on getting your academic and professional service staff on board with our live events. So Sophie, how much did you involve other staff in the events?
So we were one of the 5 universities that launched Unibuddy in 2017, and that was piloted within the UK recruitment team. We created our students chat webpage using our student ambassador leaders, and then we extended out throughout the year to get departmental student ambassadors on board. So then we had a good variety basically on there. So at first it was predominantly students on the platform available to chat to prospective students. Then a live event wise, we launched earlier this year following our applicant visit days, run by the global recruitment team, which includes myself. This was shared with department staff, but they didn't actively organise their own events at that point, however supported with the promotion of the events. Our teachers and advisors conference, which Lindsay touched on in June, that involved a wider range of people from the university, and it ran a live stream platform. Following this, people became a lot more familiar with the platform across the institution, and also our medical school and South Office team ran events themselves aside from the main team. And then obviously this year, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had to move our open days to online. So Unibuddy basically replaced the departmental element of the on-campus open days, where people would normally speak to departments at the stands. So staff were heavily involved in these events from all departments. All subjects had basically their own individual or shared channels. 3 separate events, including a student live focused one. Overall, it was good feedback. So we then increased it to 2 departmental events for the September open day, so that more channels could be available for the subjects. But Unibuddy gave prospective students an opportunity to speak easily to different subjects, although via chat, gaining both student and staff insight. Attendees varied, but June's open day saw a lot of students engage and thousands of conversations took place. So essentially, how much we need to involve staff was dependent on the event, but even the student life one involved like accommodation staff, admissions team, finance, and student support where necessary.
Okay, thank you. Really detailed answer. I think you kind of also touched to some of the questions there was in the chat as well, so that's great. Did everyone respond well to the online events?
Yes, they did. Student and staff found that it was a great way to interact with prospective students and help reduce email inquiries like coming in and all the questions they were basically getting answered via Unibuddy. Unibuddy gives like prospective students a great insight from a Lancaster student perspective and student life in general. And in terms of the live events, such as like our own online open day, at first some staff, I would say, were a bit sceptical of the change, but they soon overcame that hurdle and became more confident with using the platform. This was especially following the comprehensive and appropriate training that we provided. And and obviously the success of the events was with engaging with prospective students. Prospective student engagement has also been good for the events, and we send out a survey to all that are signed up to the event, and the feedback has been generally positive. So yeah.
Kind of to add on to you mentioned a little bit, so you managed to get staff on board who were perhaps a little bit apprehensive. How did you manage that?
Overall, like I would say good communication was key. Like they didn't really get much of a choice because it was led by our team in the organisation side, but good communication and keeping them obviously up to date with what we're planning, everything, and just being enthusiastic about it, and good training of how it's going to work and everything. I would say obviously got them more on board, and once they'd got over the first event and seen how it ran, they were a lot more confident for the next ones.
Practice makes
just practice.
And how did you find that remote training? Was it challenging, or did that kind of just again get better with practice?
With regards to remote training, I would say that personally as a team we found it worked really well. For the open days, we basically conducted 2 training sessions. One was for the coordinators and the other was for general. So the coordinators were basically members of staff or ambassador leaders that coordinated the channel and basically ensured that all questions coming in were answered and delegated amongst the group fairly. Whereas the general was for students and staff that were on the channel answering the specific questions coming in from the respective students. So in this training, like we just ran through each job role, the functionalities of Unibuddy, i.e. like how to reply to a message, how to delete a message, pin messages, etc. And then just generally answering people's concerns about the platform so they were confident ahead of the day. We used the platform teams alongside Unibuddy and created an open day team which was set up, and the Unibuddy live channels were replicated to allow the coordinators to allocate questions on the day via either chat or a phone call. And then I would say that having remote training was also beneficial because we could record it and then obviously distribute it in the open day team so that it was covered if anyone had missed the training. And also we created a mock event which was available basically to the run up to the open day the week before. So people could mess around on the platform and they could gain confidence in using the platform before the live event.
Very detailed answer, thank you. And then finally, what was the number one question that came up before the event from staff?
The number one question commonly asked, I'd say, would be why won't it let me create an account? This tends to be because people either had like a prospect account set up or they hadn't filled out the required fields. The main one being they hadn't added an image. This was closely then probably followed about like how do I use the reply button. but we'd set up a visitors mailbox, which was like the central point for all inquiries on Unibuddy coming in, so we could easily respond to questions, and basically was predominantly resolving account setup issues. But the Unibuddy team was very responsive at helping us quickly resolve these issues via either email or live chat. As the events went on, obviously we got less inquiries about account setup issues as more people were then set up on the account, set up an account already, and they're already on the platform. And also another good one that we did was we basically distributed with our communications a Unibuddy top tip Word document. This was like obviously really helpful to eliminate some of those questions from staff other than the account issues. Some examples, I'll just get it up, some examples that we put on there where you can now delete a message after you have posted. However, it will show that message has been deleted. So where possible, answer correctly the first time. Accounts will be deactivated once you have email visit us inbox to inform us to do so. If any messages come up during this interim period, then when the account is live, we will send an automated response, so do not reply. And also, just like a top tip to the best platform that the Unibuddy platform works on is Google Chrome or Firefox, because we did come across a lot of issues when they were using different web browsers.
Mhm.
So I found that really useful.
Yeah, that's some really handy tips there that we've also been advised to use Chrome. So yeah, very handy. I think we're going to go over to Ian to throw you some questions now.
Thanks so much, Sophia. That's very, very comprehensive. And we had some questions. I think we missed one or two earlier, so I'll just go back and scroll up a little bit. So one from the University of Huddersfield. Has anyone used Unibuddy as, I guess it's more of a general question, but has anyone used Unibuddy as a platform for non-recruitment events, such as online public lectures or online conferences? And I think the answer for you is yes, isn't it? You've used it for your teaching.
Yes, Lindsay, do you know a bit more on that, sorry? What specific events we've used, sorry, just because I've mainly open days.
Yeah, I can jump in there. That's probably the only one other than recruitment activity that we have used it for, the Teachers and Advisors Conference. Like I said, and that's one that we use the live stream on. That's the only one as well where we've had external people, I'd say, set up on the Unibuddy back office chat. So like I said, we have kind of external presenters from UCAS and a couple of other places. So that was quite simple, really, of getting them set up and deactivated. It worked really well with the live stream element for that, just kind of having the questions coming in. The fact that you could see what session was coming up next. So we had the live chats throughout the day, which were generally on things like student life, etc. And admissions and that sort of thing. But then you could see we had a number of sessions throughout. In fact, Unibuddy themselves ran a session there, which was really good, kind of just to give people a little bit more information. And it kind of showcased really that there are other ways that you can use the platform other than just kind of internal recruitment events. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And we've had one from Alice from the SAE Institute. So this is quite a long one, but we are a quite hands-on education provider, and as such, we need to show off the equipment we have, which is best done by video. When playing videos on a virtual event, we've found quite a few problems with lagging and glitching. Did you find this as a problem when you were streaming, and how did you fix them? And I guess this is a broader question around crisis management as well on the day. If something goes wrong, I think that's always a worry with technology. What do you have in place for those kind of things if something doesn't work on the day?
Are you wanting to answer it, Lindsay?
I was just going to quickly mention on the live stream, one thing that we did notice were issues with VPN. So that was something that we started the day on. We had people trying to watch the opening speech without being able to. We were struggling to establish why, and it turned out that if you were connected to the VPN, that caused issues with streaming. So I think just kind of familiarising yourself with anything like that beforehand that could cause an issue is one way to go about it. What we did do in the meantime to troubleshoot when we have a few, because it was only a handful, it did primarily people were fine accessing it, was just kind of highlighting, apologising and highlighting that we were recording sessions. So if there was, because that's the problem with technology, you don't know when something is going to go wrong, and it could go wrong for one person if it's fine for everybody else because of something internal within their Wi-Fi or something. So I think for me, the top kind of tip against the glitches is more about that contingency of recording it, because with all the best will in the world, there might be a time where for some reason something happens. So I think that'd be kind of my top tip, just have that backup.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're definitely right. I think, technology, with the best will in the world, sometimes it does go wrong. So I think having some kind of backup plan in place is always a good plan. But perhaps one of our tech team as well can respond to you on that, and kind of look at what you might be able to do to kind of mitigate those glitches happening potentially. So perhaps our team can also advise on that as well. We do have some other questions, which we'll come to at the end. We will make sure we've got some time at the end, but I'm keen to bring in Jen here, who's been waiting very patiently. So I'm keen to learn a little bit more about how you manage the event on the day itself, because I imagine it's quite different to managing in-person events, and someone who's never managed an event in their life, but I imagine it's quite different. So what kind of challenges have you faced in kind of managing those events on the day itself?
Yeah, so we kind of have two main ways of managing the events. I know we've touched on one with using Teams, but depending on the event and the people, I found the people in the event, there's two preferences really. One is just having a general chat that we set up beforehand. So for example, for the events I've done, it'll be me, my colleague, and then the 2 or 3 ambassadors. And we just have a chat ongoing, separate to the Unibuddy. But some of the events, especially for the open days, the staff like to have a phone call going in the background. So they'll have the conversation that way. I found some of the challenges with those, firstly with the phone call ones, is verbally getting people's attention can be quite difficult if they've zoned out or something else is in the room. If you're in a phone call, you might have to say the name a few times, which is fine. But that's kind of one of the challenges, and not knowing when people aren't there is a challenge for both of them. I wouldn't expect people on the phone call to tell me if they're going to the loo or anything like that. So you just assume they are there unless they tell you otherwise. And I think with the virtual events, people expect such a quick response. If you don't know someone's not there, even if it's just for 2 minutes, that can delay that person staying on the channel and then going somewhere else. So not being able to physically see them is one of the challenges. And also I'd say one of the other challenges is not knowing when people are struggling with their questions. So for example, if you're there in person and there's a parent and a student and you're with someone else and you're having a chat and they ask a question and the other person's not so sure on the answer, it's easy to pick that up in person. Whereas virtually, either in the team chat or on the phone call is more difficult if people aren't comfortable being really upfront saying, oh, I don't know, I'm struggling. So I think those are probably the biggest challenges when managing them.
Okay, perfect. And has there been kind of any resistance from staff wanting to get involved in these events at all? And how have you kind of encouraged them to kind of dip their toe in?
So most of the events I've kind of been involved in have been student ambassadors, so they've obviously been delighted to be involved. I think just from helping on the Teachers and Advisors Conference and on the open day, there can sometimes be some resistance from staff, but mainly because they don't want to familiarise themselves with another platform. Trying to use Teams and trying to do everything online is enough of a challenge, so using a platform they've not heard of. But I found as soon as you get one of them on board, the rest of them kind of come with them. Once you've got one of them convinced that it's useful and that they will get something out of it, it kind of snowballs from there really. So find one of them who looks keen and then they'll get everyone else on.
Yeah, that sounds like definitely a good plan. And I guess one of the key things that I would be worried about if I was managing a virtual event is making sure that their answers are on brand and they're kind of saying the right thing. I think sometimes people like, if I say this, could it be interpreted in a slightly different way than I mean it? How have you gone about kind of mitigating that and making sure everyone's kind of on brand, if you like?
Yeah, I think everyone's had that where you've seen a response and you're, oh no. Luckily, we haven't had anything too challenging like that. I don't know if Lindsay's thinking of any examples. But the main tips I've had with dealing with that, especially with ambassadors, is giving them updates right before the event of anything that they need to be aware of, especially in the current climate with A-levels and everything happening with schools. They might not be aware of what the university's official messaging is. So recently, on Friday, Lancashire was announced it's going into tier 3. So Lindsay and the team had to deal quite quickly with announcing that and giving staff kind of the university messaging. So keeping that throughout. And if anyone is having a difficult question where you're thinking that their answer could potentially go off brand, to give them some tips about, oh, maybe you would think about putting this in your answer, or some kind of gentle nudges towards what you would say yourself if you were answering it. There have been a few times with the Unibuddy events with students, where there's been some questions where we just didn't feel comfortable to give them to ambassadors just based on the content. So there's only 1 or 2 times where myself and my colleague who were coordinating it just agreed between us that one of us would answer it. So there are some examples when it can be too much of a risk potentially, or too difficult a question that we would pick that up.
Yeah, so do you have a crib sheet as well that you give them, kind of, here's some common questions we might get in there, here's the kind of responses you might want to give? Do you have those kind of materials as well, or you just kind of run some training and then kind of hope that they'll take that on board?
Lindsay, I don't know if you want to pick that one up, because you do the more large scale training with the events.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to add there, actually. I suppose just to kind of add to what you were saying, I kind of look after the ambassador training side of things, and that includes kind of widens out to Unibuddy. In line with kind of consumer marketing authority law, so we kind of have the CMA regulation whereby we need to make sure everything that we say, whether it's verbal, written, however what the format is, it needs to be accurate. So we really drum that into the training, as well as giving them a detailed brief before each event. It's just about highlighting that even if it's brilliant for them to give their experience, but it's the way they say it. So even if their experience was they did this amazing module and they joined this wonderful society and this, that and the other, it's fine to say all that and say this is what I really liked about Lancaster, but what they can't do is guarantee the experience is going to be the same for that student coming in, and always to kind of say double check, because even if say that one module that student really enjoyed, if suddenly that got taken off, because obviously things change year on year, and that's why that student joined, that's where we have an issue. So we really focus on really the way they say things, and we also drum in as well about signposting where necessary, so we don't expect them to be experts in every area. I think based on what the event is, it's always good to have a list of kind of links to different websites and that sort of thing for easy access. So in the build up to the ones after the applicant visit days, we made sure we had, first of all, presence from admissions, because we knew we were going to get some of those sorts of questions. So where identifying where we might need a staff member, I think it's important. But also things that are happening at that moment. So when it got to April, and obviously we were getting a lot of queries around coronavirus and what's going to happen that we couldn't reasonably answer, it's just about signposting them in the right direction to either the most up-to-date website or an email address we can contact to make sure we are giving that accurate information, because the last thing we want to do is to give false information out, essentially. So that is really drummed into them.
Especially when it's in writing, when it's on the event in writing. The spoken word is kind of like, no, hang on, I don't remember saying that. But when it's down in writing, it's kind of there for to say. But you do have a delete button on Unibuddy Lab, I have to say. If someone does write something, oh, actually, that's not quite right, you do have that delete button, which I think not used that much, but I have seen it used once or twice, and so it is there. And if I had to sort of put you on the spot, Jen, and say, if someone's thinking about running a virtual event, maybe they haven't run one before, or they have and it didn't go as well as they wanted to, what would be your 3 top tips in terms of managing staff and student buddies on a virtual event on the day itself?
Yeah, so I'd probably say more patience is required, I think, than normal, and kind of patience with knowing that the other people in the group aren't maybe as familiar with you, or maybe learn in a different way. Something I've really taken from virtual is providing information in different formats depending on how people learn. So whatever you are speaking, also writing down, so people can kind of ingest it however they choose. Not wasting time is a big one as well. So with training and the event, don't make them longer than they need to be. People will commit to the event, but they always see it as almost a barrier to commit to the training as well, even though they should come together. So sticking to the timings with that, if people are giving you their virtual time, especially academics, they have kind of busy schedules and that they can't change. So if they're coming to the training, keep it in its timings, and having some non-work conversation while the event's going on. So if it's quiet, keeping everyone engaged with the chat. It can just be something like, oh, what biscuits are you eating? Or we have a regular conversation about snacks, which keeps people engaged and keeps kind of that human side of things, especially with the ambassadors. I think it can be difficult that because we don't work with them as much as, say, Lindsay and Sophie in our team, they don't see us as maybe people, and giving them kind of a nice insight into personality rather than just the robot copying and pasting questions for them to answer. So those would be my top 3.
Perfect, amazing. Well, thank you very much, everyone. That's gone so quickly, hasn't it? 45 minutes. But I think we do have a few minutes for some more questions. So Yolanda, if there's been some more questions come in.
Yes, I have. and also a lot of chat, which is great. Keep going in the chat. So the question to you is, do you have any tips for connecting with people in China who might not be able to access the same platforms as the UK?
Good question. Good question. Anyone want to pick that up?
Oh, I do not have any tips.
Perhaps that's one we need to think about. We can get back to the speakers lounge. I think that's quite big, isn't it? That's quite a big
I think, I mean, there's obviously barriers against some things, against what can be accessed in China. Am I right in thinking, Ian, that Unibuddy can be accessed in China?
Yeah, Unibuddy does bypass the firewalls in China, but I know, not every platform does.
Yeah.
Unibuddy can be used very much to reach those students.
Yeah, that's kind of one because that is one that when I've been speaking to the international team about things, that Unibuddy is one that we say is a good one to use because you can't access it in China, which it was another thing when we were doing the live stream, just being aware that YouTube couldn't be accessed and looking at the alternatives like WeChat and Weibo, that sort of thing. I know we've got a lot of we've got some social media through the WeChat channels that our Chinese social ambassadors manage and that sort of thing. So we do have some kind of contact, and we do access those platforms as well.
Great. Yeah, that's a great question. Whoever asked that, but that's a very good. And perhaps we'll have a further think, and we can pop some more concrete answers in Speaker Lounge if we can think of something.
Just another one come through from Faith. Are student ambassadors paid positions or volunteers?
All paid. We've got two levels. We've got the student ambassadors and student ambassador leaders, who in normal circumstances will be working in our welcome centre around 8 hours a week at the front desk each. So that's manned Monday through to Saturday. But the ambassador leaders currently are also very involved in kind of some supervisory stuff. They help out with training, observing campus tours for our ambassadors, a whole array of things really, and some of those key webinars. The ambassador rate this year is £9.77 an hour, and the ambassador leader rate is, I think, £10.76 an hour. Can't actually remember off the top of my head, but yeah, that's the kind of rate of pay they get, and it is all paid activity.
Nice.
Pretty good.
It's very nice. Didn't pay that in my day.
Yeah, I mean, that's it from the chat for now and from me, but great answers. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks for everyone. Thanks for posting the question. I said, myself and Yolanda will be around for probably the next half an hour or so in the Speakers Lounge, and hopefully some of the team from Lancaster can join in there if you have any more questions. But just a special thank you to Lindsay, Sophie, and Jen. That was amazing. Thank you so much for taking on all those questions. Some tough questions in there, and thanks everyone for joining us. And we'll see you all soon.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
See ya.
Thanks everyone.